everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am here to bring you guys my recent Kindle Unlimited favorites. So I probably should have done this video back in like September or October because I did my first KU favorites video back in July, and I thought it would be best to do this kind of video like every 3 months, but that didn't happen, so it's happening now, which is fine. I have quite a few books to recommend to you guys, especially novellas, because this past summer, I just would not stop reading KU novellas. I'm just absolutely obsessed, and I definitely read a lot of novellas by the same couple of authors, so I will get into that as well. If you don't know what Kindle Unlimited is, I will put a link down in the description. So why don't we just go ahead and jump into the recommendations. So the first one I have is Pool Girl by Cassie Mint. So Cassie Mint is a romance novella author that I discovered this summer, and I am obsessed with her. I cannot recommend her novellas highly enough. If you are someone like me who is a huge fan of Jessica Kane, and yes, I do have some Jessica Kane novellas on this list as well because I'm just obsessed with her. But this is the first novella that I read by this author, and I just really enjoyed it so much. We have a heroine who lives at this apartment complex where there's a pool in the courtyard, and so she lounges by the pool every day after work. And there is this big, burly, rough-looking dude who works at the apartment as like the handyman, and his office overlooks the pool. And so our heroine notices that he watches her, and she watches him right back. So there's definitely this attraction between the two of them, and finally she just decides to make something happen and talk to him, and so things go on from there. This was just such a fun time. Definitely gave me the most Jessica Kane vibes out of all of the novellas that I've read by this author. Next up we have The Witch's Wolves by Ellie Mae McGregor. So this is more of a paranormal romance. It's also a poly romance. So we have our main character. This is kind of a retelling of Little Red Riding Hood. She is running from this mob that wants to murder her. They believe her to be a witch, and so she's running through the woods. She runs into this cabin where these two wolf men live. They're already in an established relationship with each other. So throughout the novella, things happen between the three of them, and then they decide to be a throuple by the end. This one was unexpectedly sweet and wholesome. Also definitely has those like cottage core, fall, autumn vibes for sure. Definitely the perfect kind of novella to read at this time of year. Next up, we have The Lineup by Megan Quinn. This is the first and only book that I've read by this author, and I just really enjoyed this quirky and out-of-the-box sense of humor that Megan Quinn has. And so what I really loved about this book in particular, and the reason why I started with this one even though it's book 3 in the Brentwood Boys series, is because we have a very quirky and sunshiny hero, and Dottie, our heroine, is definitely guarded and kind of grumpy, and I love when the grumpy sunshine trope is flipped. I mean, we all enjoy grumpy heroes, of course, but I love when that script gets flipped. And what was also really fun about Jason, our hero, is that while he's really goofy and sunshiny, he also turns very dominant in the bedroom and is like the king of dirty talk. So yeah, definitely recommend this one. It was a fun time. I definitely need to read more from Megan Quinn for sure. Next up, we have Perfect Matcha by Erin McClellan. Erin McClellan has quickly become one of my favorite romance novella authors. And this was just such a sweet friends to lovers romance. We have Theo. He's a very shy guy. He needs a date for his ex-boyfriend's wedding, and so he goes to his best friend Camden because Camden is like the pro at matchmaking. So he goes to Camden to ask him to help him get a date. But Camden has been pining for Theo for years, and so he offers to help Theo out. But Theo is also very interested in trying out toys for spicy times, and Camden just so happens to work at a toy shop, and so this kind of turns into Camden teaching Theo how to have fun, and spicy times ensue. This was just so good. Had the perfect amount of angst and spice and all those things that we love in romance novels. In general, I cannot recommend Erin McClellan highly enough if you enjoy having toys used during spicy scenes in your romances, because she is the queen of that. Next, I have a couple other novellas by Cassie Mint. The first one is Mountain Captive. This is the first novella that I read by her that I gave 5 stars. I thought this was absolutely perfect. This is a kidnapping situation. Basically, we have this guy who's a recluse in the mountains, and our heroine is hiking through the woods. He realizes that she's the daughter of like a business rival or something, so he decides to kidnap her to get some sort of like ransom from his rival. And yeah, she's just like insanely attracted to him from the beginning. Spicy times ensue. This was just perfect from beginning to end. And the other novella I loved in this series is Ocean Jewel. This one is the brother's best friend trope. We have our main character who is going on like a sea voyage with her brother and her brother's best friend. Her brother is a filmmaker, and I believe the best friend kind of helps him out with that. And they have been attracted to each other for years, this best friend and our main character. And so it's like forced proximity, and it's forbidden, obviously, because they don't want the brother to find out, and it's just really great. Next up, why don't we just talk about all of the Jessica Kane novellas that I've loved recently at one time. The first one is The Pitcher's Assistant. This is one that I haven't really heard that many people talk about, but the plot really appealed to me because it is a sports romance, specifically a baseball romance, which I haven't read too many of those. But we have our main character. She wants to be a journalist, and I believe she's been kind of working as an intern for this like newspaper. So she's just covering this baseball game. She ends up going into the locker room of one of the baseball teams, and this guy who is the pitcher for the team, I believe his name is Court. For some reason I can remember his name, but he's the pitcher for this team, but he's also a recluse. Like, he never gives interviews, he never talks to the press. Yeah, he lives like a very closed off life, but he sees her right away, falls in love with her. Jessica Kane is the queen of Insta love. And so he immediately is just like, quit your job, come be my assistant, and I will give you an exclusive interview. And so she's like, okay. And so she goes back to his place. Spicy times happen. This one's definitely on the shorter side for Jessica Kane. This one was just about 50 pages, and sometimes she writes really short ones like this one. Sometimes she writes longer ones that are about 100 pages, maybe a little bit more, but it definitely didn't feel too short. It was the perfect amount for these characters and their story. Next up, we have Hefty, which is my absolute favorite Jessica Kane novella ever, and that is really saying something, because I have binged so many novellas by Jessica Kane this year, and I've given most of them 5 stars, but this one is truly on a different level. I will never shut up about how amazing I personally think Jessica Kane is at writing new adult romances. This one takes place in high school. We have our hero who is on the football team, and then our heroine who is like the head cheerleader. So our hero, he's definitely a bigger guy. Jessica Kane writes a lot of like big boy romances, which we always appreciate that kind of representation. And this was just so freaking sweet, because the way that these two main characters pined for one another, and it's also like a childhood friends to lovers story, because they have known each other for quite a few years, and they're afraid to confess their feelings to the other character because they just don't feel like they're good enough for the other character. And it's just, like I said, the perfect amount of pining and angst. If you read any Jessica Kane novella based off of my recommendation, it has to be this one. That is how fantastic it is. Next up, we have Making Their Vows by Jessica Kane. So this is another new adult romance from her. We are centering around a main character who definitely is very wealthy, very rich. She goes to this very elite private school. And then our hero, he is very poor. It's just him and his sister. I can't remember what happened to his parents, but he is an underground fighter to try to earn money to support himself and his younger sister. And so our main character, she ends up going to one of these underground fights because like this guy who wants to be her boyfriend, or maybe is her ex-boyfriend, like he's on the wrestling team at their elite private school, and so he decides that it would be a great idea to just go fight an underground fighter. And so the second that our hero sees our heroine, again, love at first sight, insta love situation. Jessica Kane just does those really well. I'm not always a fan of insta love in my romances, but in my opinion, she is just amazing at writing it. And then the last Jessica Kane novella that I want to talk about in this video is Bewitching the Boss. This is one of her most recent releases. This is a Halloween themed novella, but you don't have to read it during Halloween. I mean, it is kind of centering around a Halloween party, but other than that, it's not that Halloween-y. We have a very interesting situation in this novella because our heroine is actually the experienced one and our hero is a virgin, which is very unusual for Jessica Kane, but I think she writes that so well. And our heroine basically feels very guilty because she believes that she is responsible for something traumatic that happened to our hero a few years before the novella starts. And so she starts stalking our hero. He's also a billionaire. He's also a nerd, and so she just can't help but be insanely attracted to him. And she's also a party planner, and so she inserts herself into his life by planning out a Halloween party that he's throwing for his employees. And this one was so amazing for me personally because it is so different for a Jessica Kane novella. She like never writes nerdy heroes. She hardly ever writes virgin heroes. Usually the heroine is the virgin. And I also loved that by the end, both the hero and heroine end up stalking each other, and that they didn't want to have kids because they were just so obsessed with each other. Like, that is just absolutely iconic. Next up, we have Games We Play. This is definitely a very unique novella. It kind of lives in my head rent-free. There's some scenes in this novella that are just very distinct in my mind. But we have our main character, Jack, and for a living, he becomes this faceless gamer guy known as the Joker or Joker. And so he's very reminiscent of people like Corpse Husband, who have these very deep, sexy voices, and they do these live streams. So basically on these streams, fans request for him to kind of make their sexual fantasies come to life with his voice. We have Quinlan, our heroine, who wants to interview him for a publication that she works for. And so she meets him at his apartment to interview him, and spicy times quickly ensue because from the moment that they meet, they are just insanely attracted to each other. Definitely look up content warnings for this and the different kinks that are involved, because there's a lot of kinks in this that I have never seen in any other romance or erotic novella or novel or anything that I've read before. There's definitely some pretty unique things going on in this novella. Next up, we have An Evening at Crystal Lake by Rachel J. Thompson. This is a short story. You can't even call it a novella because it's 17 pages. It is so short. But basically we have our main character. Her husband is a photographer and she is primarily his model, and so they decide to do this horror movie themed photo shoot at this creepy looking cabin at Crystal Lake, and they decide to hire this actor off of Craigslist, I believe, to portray Jason Voorhees. And so basically the husband wants to take pictures of this guy and our main character together. Things pretty quickly turn spicy between the guy that they hire and our main character, and the whole time the husband is just taking pictures of them, and this was unexpectedly hot. It was a fun time. I wanted it to be longer. I can't wait to see what this author comes out with next because I will definitely read it. Next up, we have A Lesson in Blackmail by Katie Robichaux. So this is a very interesting novella because it is about BDSM and it is a teacher-student relationship. However, the hero is the student. He's 18 years old. He's a senior in high school, and our heroine is 22 and she's a librarian at the private school that the hero goes to. And so our heroine knows that she's a submissive. She goes to this BDSM club every Friday night, and our hero, he doesn't know it yet, but he's definitely a dominant, and so a relationship starts between the two of them. This was just really fun, really different. It was very educational about BDSM, so this is something that I would recommend if you aren't really sure what that is, or if you aren't really sure if you like BDSM in your romances. I also loved that even though our hero is the student, he was definitely the powerful one in their relationship. I have an entire series to talk about that's on Kindle Unlimited. This is the Madison Kate series by Tate James. This is a contemporary reverse harem series that centers around our main character, Madison Kate. At the beginning of book one, she meets these three men on riot night. Basically, this was a night in their town where shit went down, riots started, and she meets these three men. They kind of save her from the chaos and they drop her off, and they tell her that a friend of theirs will come pick her up soon, and so they leave her, and then the police show up, and so she thinks that she's been framed by these three men, and so understandably so, she hates them. And then she finds out that these three guys are now living at her dad's house, and so she's stuck living with these guys, and along the way she falls in love with the three of them. And this was just such an addictive series. I read all 4 books at one time. It was just so good. I can see why it's so hyped, especially on TikTok. I would definitely recommend checking it out if you are someone like me who's just starting to get into reverse harems. And speaking of reverse harems, I have another one to talk about, and that is Scream for Us by Molly Doyle. This is a Halloween novella, as you can tell. This one takes place on Halloween night. We have our heroine Quinn, and she meets these 3 guys that are dressed as different horror movie villains. There's one that's dressed as Ghostface from Scream, Jason Voorhees, and Michael Myers. They are instantly very attracted to her. This also has strong horror movie vibes because they find out that Quinn was really badly bullied in high school, and so they decide to like go murder the people that bullied her. And these 3 heroes are definitely psychos, and it was just a really fun time, like the perfect novella to read at this time of year. And then last but not least, I have to talk about Gothichana by Rue Nix. Now this is a very chunky book. It's about 450 pages. This is a gothic romance in every sense of the word. We have Corvina, our main character. She gets this mysterious handwritten letter inviting her to go to Varenmoor University, which is a university that is set at this crazy gothic castle. And she meets this guy Vod, who is a professor at this university, but he's also a PhD candidate, so he's technically also a student at the university, even though he is also her teacher. So it is a teacher-student romance, but she's 21, he's 28. It's not that big of an age gap, so to me, it's not all that taboo. There's other mysterious and suspenseful things going on having to do with this university and the woods that are right next to the university. So the vibes are absolutely everything. This is one of the only gothic romances that I've ever read, and I just loved it. The pacing was off at times, like this isn't a perfect book by any means, but the vibes were so good, and I ended up really loving the romance between Corvina and Vod, so I couldn't help but give it 5 stars, and I highly recommend it if you are someone that wants to check out gothic romances. Alright guys, that is it for all of my recent Kindle Unlimited favorites. Definitely leave a comment down below if you have any Kindle Unlimited recommendations, because I am just obsessed with this subscription service. I'm so glad that I finally decided to get it. Actually, over the summer, they had this really amazing deal that you could get like a year of KU for a really discounted price. So if I were you, I would definitely look out for those deals. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I would love it if you would leave a like and subscribe, and I thank you so much in advance if you do, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!